for the nice song. Happy Sabbath, church. I'm very glad to see you again after a few weeks. As many of you know that I don't only pastor our church here, but also Marinhö, the church at Marinhö, with a team of pastors. And we have this tradition in the Adventist church that the pastor goes from church to church to preach, so that the churches are not bored by listening to one pastor every Sabbath. So that's what makes it hard for me to be here with you, and that's good for you. You don't have to bear up with me every Sabbath. But on the other hand, I'm glad every time I can come and see you, and I hope it can be more and more in the future. When it comes to movies, Hollywood does not always produce the best movies of the earth, but there are some movies that I personally really enjoy, and there's this one which was done sometime in the 80s called Amadeus. Maybe does someone of you know the film Amadeus? Has anyone seen it? All right, not many. It's an exciting one, or I see some people nodding their heads here. It's this movie is about the life of Mozart, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, from the perspective of Salieri, the court composer of King Joseph II of Austria back in the 18th century. And in fact, it is told out of the perspective of this person called Salieri. Don't take it too much seriously what happens in the film, because it is all dramatized and the whole thing is not very true what happens there. But the character Salieri is very interesting. He says that he always dreamt of becoming a musician ever since he was a child, and he prayed as a child, Lord, if you make me a musician, and that's my prayer, please make me a musician, a famous composer, an immortal one of whom people shall speak in all ages, and if you make my dream come true, I am going to give you as an expression of my thankfulness, my chastity, and I'm going to work as hard as I can. And you know what? His dream was fulfilled. It became true, and as a young man, he made it to Vienna, to the city of music, and he became the personal music teacher of the king himself. He was not very blessed by the gift of music, this king, but it doesn't matter. He was the teacher of the king, and everything seemed to work out well for him until he met a young guy. A young guy who was very decadent and childish in his way of action, but who created music which was just heavenly, unheard music, and he did it with so much lightness and with so much grace that Salieri could not take it. We're talking about Mozart here, a young man, decadent as I said, but heavenly music. And Salieri could not handle the fact that he was so pious and God-fearing and praying that he gets the gift of music, and there is another person who does not fear God, and he's just great at it. And I want to show you a key scene out of the film, just two minutes, when Salieri met Mozart for the first time, as he was invited to the Caesar's court, and Salieri had prepared a piece of music as a way of saying welcome to Mozart. And let's take a look at the scene where Mozart was asked to play that piece Salieri wrote for him, because he said, it's all in my head and I don't need any notes. And the Caesar tells to him, all right, then prove what you can do. Let's check out the scene for a few seconds, and it reveals some important things.
Let it be German. Oh. This is yours.
Keep it, Majesty, if you want. It's already here in my head.
What? On one hearing only?
I think so, sire. Yes.
Show us.
Work, does it? Did you try? Shouldn't it be a bit more? Or this? This? Yes. What do you think?
Grazie, Signore. All I ever wanted was to sing to God. He gave me that longing. And then made me mute. Why? Tell me that. If he didn't want me to praise him with music, why implant the desire? Like a lust in my body. And then deny me the talent.
All right, thank you. So that's the only scene I'm showing you. Yeah, too bad. So we can turn back the lights back to natural light. Thanks, Johannes. I forgot to mention that Salieri, this old man is himself reflecting upon his life as an old man, saying, if God gave me the desire to make music, so if He gave me the desire, why not give me the talent? Yeah, you see how embittered he is by what he experiences, of his longing, his deep longing to create great music, and the acknowledgement that he attached to it did not come true, and he could not handle the situation. The topic of my sermon this morning is, how shall we handle the issue that our longings, things that we desire for deep within our hearts, are sometimes not a reality? Yeah. How shall we bear with the fact that we live in a world where the things that we long for deep in our hearts do not become true? How shall we deal with it? Yeah, it is true that all of us come to this world with deep desires that we have in our hearts. All of us desire love and significance, and we have a deep longing for peace of mind and success, for love and trust relationships. And these desires that we hold in our hearts, many of them, are in fact a memory of the life God has created us for in the beginning. They remind us of a life as it was meant to be, as God created it. But the thing is that these familiar memories and these desires that we have in our hearts for so many things, good things, seem to come from a world far away and do not seem to reflect what we experience. Because our experience is often different to what we desire in our hearts. There are hurts and misunderstandings in relationships and in friendships. There is failure and disappointments, broken trust, broken relationships. Even in our joys, we are afraid. Do you know the feeling sometimes that you are very happy about a situation and your heart is full of joy and you are kind of fearful to keep that joy because you go like, I may lose it. Yeah. The fear of loss, it can go away. So can I be really happy because it can be away in some time. The reality seems to menace the things that we cherish. And even the small things that we experience that are going well are threatened of being lost. So the question is, what shall we do with our unfulfilled desires? How shall we deal with them? How shall we deal with the fact that what God has created us for in the beginning has become so vulnerable? In trying to answer this question, let us take a closer look at a Bible story. And dear children, now is your time to watch out. Let's read together Genesis chapter 13, if you have your Bibles. All right. Of course, I'm not going to tell you how many Bible texts we're going to have, because that's going to decide whether you're going to watch out, whether you're going to stay attentive or not. So, without much ado, Genesis chapter 13. And if you work hard, you're going to get that nice little gift Eli has prepared for you. It's the story of Abram and Lot. Abram and his nephew Lot. And it is, in fact, a long story, a long background of the story. We find it in Genesis 11 and 12, where Abram seems to have become like a father, a second father for Lot, who had lost his father when they were back in Babylon before they moved to Canaan. And the background of the story was that Abram, with all his clan living in Canaan, was faced with a drought that took over the land, and they had to flee to Egypt. And now they are back. And Lot is always with his uncle Abram. And that's where the story starts. And I invite you that we read the first 4 verses in chapter 13. Genesis 13, 1 to 4. Then Abram went up from Egypt, he and his wife, and all that he had, and Lot with him, to the south. Abram was very rich in livestock, in silver and in gold, and he went on his way from the south as far as Bethel, to the place where his tent had been at the beginning, between Bethel and Ai, to the place of the altar which he had made there at first. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. We observe here that they moved back from Egypt and they settled in the southern part of Canaan, and we are told that Abram is a very influential person with lots of money. So our imagination shall not be like Abram, his wife, and some 10 people or so. There were about probably 1,000 people, and he was very rich, had lots of goods. And as he went back to this place, he recognized an altar standing there, which meant a lot to him, because when he arrived to Canaan in the first place, that was the place where he arrived, to the place God had promised to give him and his children, and he had built up this altar expressing his faith that God would fulfill His promise. And that was some time ago. And now he would come back to this place, which reminded him of the promise that God had given to him. And he called on the name of the Lord, expressing his faith. Yes, you are going to make your promise come true by giving me and my offspring this land. And we are told, as I said, that he was a very rich man, and he was in fact a shepherd owner with lots of livestock. And we are told in verse 5 that he was not the only one with lots of herd, but also Lot. We hear of him, verse 5, Lot also, who went with Abram, had flocks and herds and tents, which created a problem in the end. They still had so much property and so much herd that the space of pasture was too little as time went by. And we hear in verse 6, now the land was not able to support them, and that they might dwell together, for their possessions were so great that they could not dwell together. And there was strife between the herdsmen of Abram's livestock and the herdsmen of Lot's livestock. The Canaanites and the Perizzites then dwelt in the land. As we observe here, so much sheep, so much herd, and too little space for all the cattle, too little pasture. And what happens there? Tension arises. Tension arises between the shepherds of Abram and the shepherds of Lot. And tensions that arise among families can become very, very complex. We notice it a little bit in the country where I originally come from. I'm from Ethiopia, and there is tension with Eritrea. A big family, and it is very, very stressful. Yeah. And even in a smaller context, you probably will know that if problems come up in families, then it can be really, really hard. Yeah. With people who don't have to deal with so much, it's not a problem. But among brothers and sisters in a family context, if tension arises, it can be really tense and stressful. And there are different ways in how to handle problems. One method is like just shut up. Yeah. You know that method? Just take it in grace, we are told as Christians. Or some people, it does not even have to do with Christianity. Many would go like, all right, time will heal the problems. So people would just swallow and say nothing and take it and hope things will change. The other way of the solution is expressing anger and going like, it can't go this way. And even sometimes when people, swallow and swallow and swallow, you know what happens? If you take too much, then comes a time, when too much is just too much, so you would boom, explode, and everyone is going, hey, what happened here? This person is so quiet and he would never say a thing. And all of a sudden he's from 0 to 100. What happened? So, this way of handling a conflict is not really the most successful one. Just to shut up or to explode because you cannot take it anymore. Well, how does Abram handle the situation, or how is the situation handled here? We hear there was tension and it was expressed among the herdsmen. That word got to Abram about what was going on. And Abram seeks solution and makes an offer to Lot for that matter. He goes up to Lot, and we read his words in starting verse 8. Abram said to Lot, please let there be no strife between you and me, and between my herdsmen and your herdsmen, for we are brethren. Is not the whole land before you? Please separate from me. If you take the left, then I'll go to the right. Or if you go to the right, then I'll go to the left. All right, what is going on here? Abraham is known to be a very harmonious person. Yeah, you know the story when they arrived to Egypt. He would tell that Sarah would be his sister, and you know the story when Sarah came up with the idea to help out in getting children. He would accept the idea to accommodate with Hagar, a story we hear about in chapter 15. Dear children, I hope you're watching out. Yeah. And could it be that he's going like, all right, no problem here. All right, you go to the left and I go to the right, and choose what you want to. The fact of the matter is that Abraham was an influential person. He was the older person. In fact, he was also the person God had promised to give the land to. So he could go and say, all right, I'm going to take this part of land because I choose it. But we observe here that for Abraham, the relationship to his nephew seems to be more important to him than gaining land. So he does without the fact that he goes along without his right, or applying his right to choose land, and he goes and says, Lot, choose a land, and I want peace in our home, so please help yourself. And what happens? Lot listens to this and he does not go like, oh, that's so nice of you, please, you choose first. No. Lot takes his chance and he says, oh, thank you. Thanks, if you ask, why not? And we read on, starting 10, and Lot lifted his eyes and saw the plain of Jordan, that it was well watered everywhere before the Lord destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah, like the garden of the Lord, like the land of Egypt, as you go towards Zoar. Then Lot chose for himself all the plain of Jordan, and Lot journeyed east, and they separated from each other. So Lot takes a look around himself and he sees the green pasture of the plain of the Jordan, and this pasture was so good and was so green and so fruitful that the author even compares it to the garden of the Lord. And what is the garden of the Lord? The Garden of Eden. It is compared to the Garden of Eden. It was that beautiful. So you would take a look and say, wow, a very good pasture for my sheep, which is true. It could not even be more ideal than it is there. So Lot takes a look at Eden, the Garden of Eden, the Garden of the Lord, spoken metaphorically, and he goes like, wow, great pasture for my sheep. I'm going to go there. Welcome. But there was one problem. In fact, there were two problems in Lot, gaining eye on the garden of the Lord. The first thing is, he just took the best for himself. Yeah? Of course, you can go like, hey, he offered him. He said, you go to the left. If you go to the left, I go to the right. And we can go like, if he offers it to him, then he can go like, all right, I take the left. So it's not a problem, is it? Of course, it's not a problem in terms of a technical understanding. But imagine you'd have like a piece of cake, a big one, and you'd go like, hey, I offer you some cake, have some. And the person, all right, thank you. And he takes like 3/4 of it. Yeah. Of course, that person can say, hey, you offered it to me, didn't you? Yeah. So you cannot say anything about the situation. But you know what I mean, right? If somebody offers you something, I think there is this thing called, how do you call it? Consideration and respect. And And compassion, you go like, wow, thank you, so I'll take a little bit. So it's kind of, how do you say, selfish of Lot to handle it this way. And maybe some of you have experienced this. Yeah? So you offer somebody a little thing, and he takes it all, and you go like, okay, all right, what's up here? What's going on here? Well, so Lot is kind of selfish, and he takes the best for himself. That's the first problem. But the second problem is even greater. And it is the fact that the garden of the Lord that he's choosing is not really that peaceful, is not really as it was meant to be. Because it is interesting that while this watered green place is described, in the midst of the description of this green place, we hear that it was to be destroyed. Because we read on in verse 13, because the men of Sodom were exceedingly wicked and sinful against the Lord. This place had no future. This garden of the Lord was not the garden of the Lord anymore, because the people living there did not live according to the principles of the garden. You know, there's this mother of a friend of mine, coming from Romania, by the way. She says, I don't know whether she got it from Romania. Sister and Brother Radulescu might help me. Menschen machen den Ort, she says. Yeah, people make the difference of the place. Is that a Romanian proverb? Yeah, it is. Yeah, Menschen machen den Ort. That means people make the difference. And the idea is the best villa, the most beautiful house cannot guarantee you happiness if there is no peace in the house. Yeah. So the location is not the most decisive part, but what we make of it makes a difference. If the location would be the most important part when it comes to being happy, then Adam and Eve would not have hidden in the midst of the garden after the problem of sin. You know, it was like the best place you can ever imagine. They were there. And they hid. Because there was no peace of mind. So the place that is chosen here is perfect. The location is perfect. In fact, I'm almost tempted to tell you a story that I experienced last summer when I was in Italy with a friend of mine. We did a vacation in Italy, and we were at this beautiful, beautiful seashore. And he and myself have the habit of observing people. Yeah? We just observe the people around us, how they're doing and what they're doing, and we enjoy that. And just talk about that. Just enjoy observing people. And there was this pair, you know, a young man and a young lady, and all of a sudden they came with a bottle of champagne and with 2 glasses. And they sat down, and they even had some food with them, and they were totally excited about the moment. So he would take the bottle, yeah, and give her some champagne and look at her in the eye, and then came the problem. There were like bees around, you know, and they smelled what was going on there. They smelled the champagne, and they smelled the food that they had along. So all of a sudden those bees would come and disturb this highly romantic moment. You know, you could go like, they were so happy about it. All of a sudden bees all over the place. Yeah? And we went like, oh no, not now, you know. And the thing is, we hoped that you would handle it with grace and go like, oh hey, baby, you know, the bees are here, but we move somewhere else. All of a sudden, the whole atmosphere was gone. He was totally irritated. He did not know how to handle it, and she was irritated about it as well. And the romance was just gone. And my friend and myself, oh, he's got to do something. He's got to do something, you know, because they are having a nice time. And the tragic part was, after an hour, we saw them passing by us. And they looked so disappointed and destroyed, as if something changed. And we were so so sad about this moment, because you'd go like, hey, guys, be happy. Yeah, the location is fine. All right, there are some problems arising here, but you can handle them. But that's one of the moments when I saw, you can have the best location, but if things don't work, they just don't work. Now comes the question. The problem is not in Lot choosing this green land. And it shows me that when it comes to sin is not always a moral problem. That's what we make of it. Sin can be a methodic problem as well. Meaning, Lot's wish for a green land, for a good pasture for his sheep was good. Yeah, it was a good desire. But the way he tried to fulfill the desire by choosing a land which had no future was the problem. So our desires for the good and our deep longings are not the problem, but the way we try to fulfill them can become a problem. Saliere's wish to become a great musician was not a problem. His desire was good. But the fact that he defined his personal value through music and through the acknowledgement that he gets from others was the problem. Because when somebody else came up was better than he was, he could not handle it. But what shall we do if our desires remain unfulfilled? What shall a person do who feels alone, even if he or she longs for a relationship? What shall a person do who doesn't have a job, even though he's looking for one for a long time? What shall a person do who feels misunderstood among people who are the nearest? And there are different possibilities in trying to bear up with our desires, in trying to bear up with the situation that our desires are not fulfilled, which are in fact good. One thing we can do is like that, we suppress the desire that we have, as if everything is fine. Yeah, why feel the hunger consciously when there is no food to eat? And isn't it said that after all, Christians should be thankful in all things? So one thing that we can do with our desires, unfulfilled desires, is that we go like, neglect them or suppress them or don't be conscious of them. The other thing is that in time that we resign and lose hope that our desires would ever become true, we go like, it's not going to work out. I'm just giving it up. Or another way to handle our unfulfilled desires is to become demanding, by trying to force to get what we want. And that is something that can happen to us, especially in relationships where we try to get what we want by expressing anger or by pouting. Or how do you pronounce it? Pouting? Pouting? Pouting, yeah, so it's correct, thank you. Pouting, or even by being pious. We go like, Lord, I'm going to do your will, yeah, and we're like very, very nice, but the background of our being nice is, please fulfill my wish, yeah. You know that, when you have like certain requests, yeah, I know about times and I'm tempted with that. If I have certain things I really want the Lord to do for me, then the temptation is big to be very nice in those times, to read and to be nice and, which is good in itself, but it can become a demanding thing. It's like demanding from the Lord to fulfill what I want. How does Abram react in his situation? How does he handle the situation that he stands there as a loser? Because he really seems to be a loser. He was going like, choose and the best is gone. Even though he had the chance to take the best, he did not. And as I said, was he like too harmony-seeking by leaving Lot the choice to choose the land? I believe Abraham decides not to take his destiny in his own hand by trying to force the fulfillment of God's promise on his own. In fact, he even acts like God in the meanwhile by being willing to give, because he goes to Lot and says, isn't the whole land in front of you? You take it, as if it belonged to him, even if it didn't, in fact. And later, and that's what we read in chapter 14, he even fights for Lot, who got himself in trouble, as he was taken captive for the reason that he lived there. He could go like and say, hey, you got yourself in trouble here, so what am I going to do for you? He risks his life and gets him out of trouble. And causes, in fact, later on his survival, as we read in Genesis chapter 19, as he prayed, as he prayed for Lot to get out of to get out of Sodom as it was destroyed. I believe that the first step in handling our unfulfilled desires is first not to deny them. We should not deny our wishes and desires and act as if everything is okay. I think it is good to be conscious of them and to be honest about the things that we long for which are not there. Because those desires remind us of the life God has created us for in the beginning. And of course, if I am aware of my unfulfilled desires, that creates pain and disappointment. It's like feeling hunger when there is no food. But I believe that can help us become more compassionate with ourselves and with others. If you know what it means not to experience what God has created you for, it can be on different levels, then you are not very hard on others, on judging others on where they stand. Of course, we shall act all we can to fulfill our wishes according to what is right. So it's not like, just go to a corner and be depressed and be unhappy about it or something. No, you should do what you can. A person looking for a friendship, it does not help the person just to step back and go like, I'm alone or so. Yeah, it is important that the person goes out and seeks friendship, or that a person feeling misunderstood talks about the problem, addresses the problem. Yes, it is important that we do what we can, that our wishes, at least to a certain degree, can become true. But as we do so, we should not force or try to force their fulfillment by questionable ways, by saying like, I have to get it, no matter what the price is. Because the problem is, even if we get it, we are unhappy. If you try to force your luck and happiness by manipulating or doing things that are not good, you may get what you want, but you go like, I'm unhappy. So even if Salieri got all the acknowledgement that he needed through his music, he would have gone like, all right, the people only love me because of the music. Yeah. If I didn't make it, what would they think of me? So if we define ourselves through achievements or whatever, we are going to end up empty, because we go like, that's not what I was looking for. Because what I'm looking for is, in Salieri's case, to be loved for who I am and not for what I can achieve. Abraham decides to remain in Canaan without a land after Lot separated from him. And it is interesting that God speaks to him right in the situation where he seems to stand as a loser. Right in this situation, God's voice reaches him, and we read, starting verse 14, and the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had separated from him, lift your eyes now and look from the place where you are, northward, southward, eastward, and westward. For all the land which you see, I give to you and your descendants forever. And I will make your descendants as the dust of the earth, so that if a man could number the dust of the earth, then your descendants also could be numbered. Arise, walk in the land through its length and its width, for I give it to you. It is interesting how this passage is introduced. We hear, the Lord said to Abram, when? After Lot had separated from him. Right in the situation where he seems to stand there as a loser, as a person who did not take his right and the other person is taking all his chance. In this situation where he seems to stand there without nothing, God speaks to him and says, you know what, Abram? All the land shall be yours and your children's. The north and the south, the east and the west. Lot chose the east. And God said, all of it shall be yours in the end. All of it shall be inherited by you and by your children. And it is interesting that God says, all the land shall be yours. And that was what Abraham did when he said, all the land is for you. You can choose. And God says, all of the land shall become your inheritance. But in reality, when you take a closer look at the life of Abraham, at the end of his life, did he own all the land? North, south, east and west? Not really. All that he had till his death was a little piece of field, a little piece of land which he bought because he needed a place to bury his wife. Of course, this is not really good news, as a pastor or as a person preaching, we would hope we need some good news, All right, now comes the solution of the problem. Abraham did not force to get his desire fulfilled, and God comes and says, everything is yours, and the next day, everything was his. I wish I could tell you that, but I can't. All that Abraham had all his life was a little piece of land. And he never experienced himself how Israel in time got more and more and more of the land. He never experienced how Israel inherited the land. He never saw it himself. That happened much, much time later. In fact, he remained a stranger in Canaan all his life. Well, despite of the fact he does something. And I want to read that with you. In verse 18. Abram removed his tent and came and dwelt in the plain of Mamre, which is in Hebron, and built there an altar unto the Lord. What he did is, he built up an altar, holding on to God's promise, which shall be fulfilled sometime, but he himself did not experience the fulfillment of his dream. The fulfilling of our desires, and that's the news of it all, which is sad but it's true, the fulfilling of our desires will remain partial and incomplete in this world, because our world is broken. And even the little that we have is very vulnerable. Well, we may and even shall feel the pain and the sadness about the fact that what God has created us for is not a total reality. And yes, we shall do what we can to reach as much as possible. But we shall never resign or lose hope. And at the same time, we should not try to force the fulfillment of our longings by becoming demanding of others and life itself, by trying to get more than the world or others or life can give us where we are in this broken world. And I think by being less demanding, we may become freer to give and to love. And we may learn to cherish the little and the vulnerable happiness or good that we have and experience. And I think of all things, our consciousness about the fact that our desires can only be partially fulfilled in this life can make us long all the more intensely for the life that God has promised to give us when He comes again. That can keep our dream alive to go like, God, I know what You have created me for, and I'm not experiencing lots of it here. But I know and I believe in Your promise that You will come again and make the life You have created me for a total reality. And I think this consciousness about the brokenness of life can keep our hope alive to His coming. And my prayer is that God keeps our hearts focused on Him, because I believe He's the one who understands most how to handle the unfulfilled desires that we have to deal with. There is no one who understands as He does. And that we may experience it as we face life which is broken. That is my wish for you and for me. Amen.